This week, as always, we get started off with a little coffee talk. We'll talk about the dry weather, how it's affecting things, and grass fires in the area. Hank Williams Jr.'s truck goes on the auction block. An EV crate motor to replace a small block Chevrolet V8 and the Co-op Model 3 tractor. This is the Rural Reflections Podcast. Welcome to the Rural Reflections Podcast. You've got Dave Nelson in Carrington, North Dakota, and Grant Nelson here at the studios of Thief River Falls Radio. Dave, it's a great show we've got put together today. Let's start it off with a big cup of coffee talk. How's the weather out there? I mean, we've all been talking about there's drought in Minnesota, there's drought in North Dakota. Heck, there's drought in much of the Midwest right now of one level or another, and it's caused some problems. I mean, right now for farmers, they got a little bit of time, but for the firemen, I know up here they're running around doing grass fires. So how's everything going out in Carrington?
Well, we haven't had much trouble with grass fires because they pretty much burnt everything off last fall. So not struggling with that much, but it's really a little bit scary about, as dry as it is, but I don't think it's going to be a problem. I think we're going to eventually get some rain here this spring, and it'll be all right. But right now, it sure feels like it's just never going to rain again. We had a heck of a nice day yesterday, except a little windy. Now today it's kind of cold, and there's some threat for a little bit of rain or snow or something today, but anyway, it's kind of nice because last week, all of a sudden everything kind of broke loose last week, and farmers were out and about looking to have their machinery ready, and they're starting to get ready for farming. I even heard the dreaded, I think I'm going to have to get my wheat in by the first week in April. And so that, for me, is kind of worrisome because we have a lot of work to do yet before people are going to be planting.
I believe that. Yeah, people need to get that weed in a little bit ahead of their row crops. I know I was listening to one of my farm shows, and they said, don't put your corn into dry soil and then hope to rain it in. You got to plant it into wet soil. But it seems like for wheat, they just want to get that in and see where we can go from there. Now, I talked to one of the firemen from up in Middle River. Actually, I've been talking to him over the weekend, getting some news from him. And they've had 3 different pretty good-sized fires they went to, ending up with 400 acres last night. Now, we're recording this on a Sunday morning, so they've been awfully busy over there. And also, as far as planting goes around here, I was picking sticks last weekend, and about 2 or 3 inches down there was enough frost where it was actually still white. And the reason I knew that is because we had a tree that had fallen and drove one of the sticks right into the ground. So we've got frost around here, but now we've got a couple of inches of soft ground on top too. So that could absorb a little bit of that moisture. I think we'd be just fine. Let's talk about trucks. You and I both like old trucks, old pickup trucks, and you found one. You've always liked the International Harvester pickup, the early 60s one, and you found what was pretty interesting truck for sale, not only because it's an International, not only because it's nice, not only because it's low miles, but because of the fella who once owned it. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, there was a Steffes auction at Roseglen, North Dakota, and they kept advertising this International pickup, and then I started looking into it because they said it had 6,639 miles on it. And here, along with all of that, they have all the authentication that shows it was Hank Williams Jr.'s pickup.
Bo Cephas.
And they even went so far as to notify Hank and let him bid if he wanted to on it. And it would have been really cool truck for me to have, but as per usual, my tastes outweigh my budget, and it went for $21,500. And the International faithful figured that was a pretty good price for the pickup alone, but there wasn't enough Hank Williams factor in there. They thought it should have been $30,000 instead.
You would have thought it would have gone a little bit more. To have that kind of background on it, that sort of history, particularly Hank Jr. is still, I think, popular amongst people who'd be interested in that kind of pickup. That's what was a 1962?
66.
Okay, that was a 66. That was a pretty truck. I went ahead and looked at the auction site, and that was an awfully pretty pickup. And I think that little engine, that's a 176?
Well, that one happened to have what the heck was it, a 304 or something in it, or a 266. No, it had a straight six,
okay.
6-cylinder 240. So yeah, it was a little bigger pickup than what I had. It's 3/4 ton and stuff, but it was just a really neat truck, and of course with 6,000 miles on it, it looked like it. It had some touch-up painting done on it, I think, and it had a few dings that they showed in the pictures, but still, it was authentic Hank Williams. They had everything pictured right down to the junk that was in the glove box on it. When he got rid of it, they had his insurance card in there. They had his purchase order the guy had made with it and stuff like that. So it was authentic, I'm sure.
I'm sure it was. Well, if it's Western North Dakota, Hank Jr. spent a lot of time out in Montana, so that makes perfect sense. Now, one thing I just wanted to talk about real quick before we went to a break here, I'm always interested in replacement engines for older vehicles or just modification. That's just kind of an interesting thing. And crate motors have been something that have played into this for a long time. There's a so-called Revolt Tesla crate motor. It comes with an electric motor from a Tesla, an inline gear reduction where a traditional transmission would bolt up behind an engine, and a universal joint waiting to be fixed to a drive shaft. Now, this will hook up to the small block. Anywhere a small block Chevy would go, you could put this Tesla in. Now, it's going to be about 550 horsepower, so it's got plenty of horsepower, but you're going to pay for it. I believe just the basic model itself was $8,000. Control unit for it was about 6 or 7, and honestly, I don't know. Batteries, I looked at a Nissan Leaf, and I think replacement batteries for that were $5,000. So you'd have to have a pretty strong interest in whatever vehicle you had and an interest in trying something new before you did this. And I was trying to think to myself, now, a small block Chevy engine, where could you replace a small block Chevy? And didn't the Massey 510, didn't that have a small block Chevy in it? The Massey 510 Combine?
350 in them.
Okay.
And I actually put a 350 in a versatile 400 swather.
Ooh.
So it can be done in a lot of things, but
it's interesting just to try different things. I don't know about the practicality of it, but it's awfully fun. Okay, Dave, let's take a break. Top off the coffee cup. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Model 3 co-op tractor. This is the Rural Reflections Podcast. Welcome back to the Rural Reflections Podcast. Dave, let's dig right in on this one. I think we're going to have a little something to say about this. The co-op tractor Model 3, they began producing these in 1936 down in St. Paul. First year, they had enough parts for 150 tractors to go out. These were marketed throughout Minnesota, Wisconsin, Montana, and the Dakotas. So where there are co-op tractors or co-op Model 3s, there'll be this area, but there's just not a whole bunch of them. But there was enough out there, so a lot of people would have some experience with them. I know you and I had experience with one because our dad had a Co-op 3. That was his one tractor that he kind of allowed himself to buy as sort of a hobby way back when, because wasn't that his first tractor?
It's possible. I don't know for sure, but he had quite a bit of experience with it on threshing crews and stuff. They use it to move the threshing machines around, which was much faster than putting it behind a tractor that went 6-7 miles an hour, because those co-ops were known for some speed. All you had to do was reach over and override the governor, and you could get it up to about 40 miles an hour.
You could even take it to town on the weekend, I suppose. I know driving Dad's, it was such a smooth engine, that Chrysler 6-cylinder gas engine. I thought it was the nicest, smoothest engine I'd heard in a little tractor in a long time. And it was different. It was kind of, I always thought about it as if I was going to try and build a tractor myself with what I had, it's kind of what I would have built. I mean, it had that big frame on the outside, and then you kind of sat inside the frame on top of the rear axle.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, that tractor. If it would have continued, I'm sure it would have evolved into something, even far better than that. But they built it out of components, truck rear end, truck transmission, pickup or truck engine, and then just fabricated a frame around that. A lot of the four-wheel drive tractors and so on had truck rear ends in them to begin with, and they adapted them with some planetaries on the outside so they could take the torque and so on that was required in the field. And so this little co-op tractor was kind of the start of component tractors. Actually, they had some weak components in them. The rear axle was a little bit challenged by any long, hard pulls, and they were pretty famous for breaking the rear axle. When I started working out by Fordville, there was a guy that was still using about 5 of them, and he had built a snare so he could just take the cap off the end of the final drive and pull the broken axle cap off, and then snare the axle shaft and pull it out and put a new one in and get back in the field. He probably carried them on the tractor with him, for all I know. So they had even some usage in the very early 70s. The co-op in Park River had a couple of them that they used for delivering anhydrous tanks with. So they found them to be handy because of the 40-mile-an-hour road speed. And then if they got into a situation in a field where they needed some pull, a half-ton pickup couldn't handle a hydrous tank very well out in soft dirt. So they had their use, and they were kind of a unique design. They had actually live PTO available on them, or engine-driven PTO, I should say. It was a chain drive off of the housing, and then you had a little shift lever underneath you. But I thought it was a cool tractor, and like you said, that smooth running thing, you open it up, and you didn't even hardly hear the bark of the exhaust like you hear on a normal tractor. You would just kind of hear a louder hum.
Yeah, it was a nice, smooth sound. And as I recall, the throttle was, you kind of reached under and you'd pull it up. And that was even actually, I thought, kind of smooth. So are you saying that it was basically a live PTO on there?
Well, they had it was live driven, but you had to stop it and move a lever to engage it,
Okay. And as I recall, that little 6-cylinder engine wasn't actually so little. It had 42 horsepower on there, wasn't it? Something like that?
Yeah, and then they were known to be good pulling. They had good power for their little 42 horses.
Well, it seems like the tractor itself started out with some decent components, maybe not always perfect, but they put it together in a pretty good format where the average farmer could go ahead and buy it and not spend a whole bunch of money. I think that was kind of the whole idea behind it, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm sure that was, and the co-ops, in those days, that was their thing. They were trying to keep prices down for people and so on, and it had its place in agriculture of its time, because they were quite popular at one point.
You restored one some time ago. how much of how deep did you have to go on the restoration?
Well, we overhauled the rear axle, and it was just a truck rear end, like I said. So it's bearings, basically, and setting them up again and so on, and seals. And then we did the clutch and the engine overhaul. That's kind of where it started, was just an engine overhaul, which, as we dug into it, it ended up being a short block engine. But it was a really kind of simple to work on. Not anything really deep about it. It was just kind of well made. The frame was solid on it and so on.
Yeah, I remember there being quite a bit of weight to it. I mean, it seemed like it had some nice heft to it. And I liked the color too. When I finally saw one properly painted with the right colors, kind of an attractive looking tractor.
They were, and the big front lights on it, it was kind of a trucky looking front lights, but that red and gold, or red and yellow colors on it was, I suppose, the color of a Farmers Union oil can.
I suppose it probably was. I remember Dad always liked it when I took it out and drove it. I think the only time I ever used it was to rake a little hay, but occasionally I'd take it out and just drive it around. And he seemed to get kind of a kick out of that,
Mm-hmm.
Well, Dave, I suppose we better wrap her up for this week. You got anything else for us before I let you go?
No, I guess not. We're just going to get ready for a cooler week this week, it sounds like, and maybe I'll catch up a little bit this week.
That'd be just fine here. Dave, we'll talk to you next week, okay? There he is, my brother Dave from Carrington, North Dakota. I'm Grant Nelson here at the studios of Thief River Falls Radio. And this has been the Rural Reflections Podcast.